Hi, this is Kasian, and it's time for our weekly conference call at VectorspaceAI. We'll start with what's happening around the world. CNBC reports the U.S. bans imports from China's Xinjiang region, citing human rights abuses. Meanwhile, the world is weighing economic impact of the recent Omicron lockdowns. BTC is trading at 51K, ETH is trading in a range of 4,100, and the Dow is at 35.8. On the industry side, VentureBeat reports open source NLP is fueling a new wave of startups. The University of Washington's AI protein folding discovery wins Breakthrough of the Year award from Science magazine. Quoting, Science magazine has revealed its Breakthrough of the Year artificial intelligence discoveries that predict how proteins fold, forged by researchers at University of Washington's Institute for Protein Design and Alphabet's DeepMind's AlphaFold 2. The original academic journal annually bestows the award of the year's biggest finding across fields from physics to astronomy to biology. The University of Washington researchers behind this year's awards developed a tool called Rosetta Fold that stunned scientists across the physical and life sciences with its speed and accuracy in predicting how proteins form three-dimensional shapes. The breakthrough in protein folding is one of the greatest ever in terms of both scientific achievement and enabling of future research, wrote H. Holden Thorpe, a biochemist and editor-in-chief of Science, in an editorial. Unquote. And as we know, all made possible by DeepMind's AlphaFold 2's use of language models, which were at the core of this breakthrough, in particular transformers and self-attention models. Next, AI used to predict synthesis of complex novel materials no chemist could predict. Quoting, mapping the materials genome, according to Merkin, a scientist on the project, what makes this so important is the access to unprecedentedly large quality data sets, because machine learning models and AI algorithms can only be as good as the data used to train them. When mapping the human genome, scientists were tasked with identifying combinations of 4 bases, but the loosely synonymous materials genome, including nanoparticle combinations of any of the usable 118 elements in the periodic table, as well as parameters of shape, size, phase morphology, crystal structure, and more. Building smaller subsets of nanoparticles in the form of mega libraries will bring researchers closer to completing a full map of a material's genome. Using mega libraries as a source of high quality and large-scale materials data for training artificial intelligence algorithms enables researchers to move away from the keen chemical intuition and serial experimentation typically accompanying the materials discovery process, according to Merkin. Next, Cardiff startup SpaceForge boosted after closing the biggest seed funding round in Europe's space tech sector. Quoting, the Cardiff firm is pioneering returnable satellites designed for manufacturing next-generation supermaterials in space. And next, Business Insider is reporting SpaceX is launching human muscle tissues into space as part of a study that hopes to uncover the secrets of aging. And we know that connects directly to work we are doing with our scientific collaborators, in addition to work related to the stressor that is microgravity that causes muscle atrophy, and that relates to atrogenes that are a group of genes that are being studied related to how to improve muscle condition during spaceflight. Next, Wired is reporting 2022 will be a big year for space exploration. Quoting, mission to Mars, Jupiter, and yes, Texas are all part of the next wave of space research previously delayed by COVID-19. Next, we've got themes and events, and we are engaged in quality assurance related to our new thematic crypto baskets API, and we are introducing it to those on the thematic baskets channel, where they're able to generate baskets of crypto and then use components that will be developed for Vector Screen, which is a product we'll talk about shortly. This is a product that enables the filtering of baskets. So we are testing new ways of filtering baskets and proprietary ways of filtering baskets, not just using conventional indicators or methods. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. Next, we'll move to our corporate side, and everything is steady as she goes there. And we'll move straight to engineering, product QA, and ops. And we'll combine that with customers, partners, and collaborators this week. And under this section, we'll start with University College of London. And we met with them today to talk about a particular subject. It started with a question, which was, how much information do we lose when we flatten a graph into a vector? We also talked about objectives, and these objectives relate to what we're going to collaborate on the machine learning engineering and machine learning theoretical side of machine learning. And primarily, we're going to be determining what we can practically apply, of course, as fast as possible. And that's going to relate to an analysis of stressors, and one of those being microgravity and another being radiation, and the development of countermeasures that can be repurposed, of course, for everyone. We also discussed the development of ensembled language models, some of the best ways to combine language models and lay them on top of, or lay them as functioning components, plug them in as functioning components on top of NASA's omics data, all the genomics data and metabiomics data that is being collected at NASA related to space biosciences. We also talked about drug repurposing and drug cocktail development, drug development in general, and how language models are being used to do that, and how to include aspects of nutrigenomics. We talked about correlation matrix data sets for human aging, because our collaboration with UCL will extend to ICL, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We also talked about near real-time relationship networks based on online learning methodology. And for those that are machine learning practitioners, online learning methodology is something that we consider the wave of the future in the unsupervised clustering area. And we also talked about our collaborators with University College of London, because we're establishing a broad collaboration. Our individual collaborations, our independent collaborations, we have with UCL, ICL, CERN, and soon to be NASA and Azure Space / SpaceX, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, the Bissell Lab. We're going to combine all of these. We're not just pursuing these at random here. We have a purpose, and the purpose is to unify these collaborators, join them into one large collaboration where we're doing a lot of data sharing and creating master data sets, of course, but engaging in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary work, where our work at UCL on the machine learning side and understanding better ways of clustering applies to our work at CERN and understanding better ways to cluster what are called events, what they call events, which is an experimental run, which is a particle being smashed into another particle so that they can observe what other particles result, or what patterns or energies or what measurements they can make. They collect all of that data, and they'd like to cluster these events with one another, these experimental runs. And we met with CERN this week. This is what we discussed. We also discussed that we're collaborating with, we have other machine learning collaborations, academic collaborations, and we're going to loop everybody in as one team and create some solutions here. And one of them includes leveraging our academic arm at UCL on the machine learning and unsupervised learning side, and engaging in better clustering for CERN. And that also led to a conversation related to NASA and Imperial College of London and Azure Space / SpaceX. and creating data sets and matrix factorization and comparing graphs with one another, graph networks with about 100 nodes, compare graph networks for similarity. And as mentioned, coming up with new ways of clustering, spectral clustering in particular. So we're not going to get into too much detail. We'll get into the weeds if we do. So we'll move next to Imperial College of London. And you can see that work with University College of London falls right into the lap of our collaboration with Imperial College of London in terms of preparing a real-time relationship network. And that's for joint presentation to the Biophysical Society. So we are, that work is going to take up most of our time, so we're nose to the grindstone on that, and we won't come up for air on that one, most of our engineers at least, until February 15th. We are concurrently, as mentioned, working with CERN. I've got a note here to provide us an update on CERN, but we did just talk about them, and that just relates to new clustering methods. On the Azure Space/SpaceX side, that just relates to providing them with the posters from ICL. So those should be ready around February 15th. And that way Azure Space will have a very good idea of how they can better position our data sets and knowledge graphs. And knowledge graphs are something that we also discussed heavily with UCL. And knowledge graphs is something that we'll be building for ICL. So we've got a lot of expertise at UCL and internally, of course, related to the construction of knowledge graphs and graph networks, which applies to every one of our collaborators here and applies to Azure Space/SpaceX, where the CosmoDB, a graph database, is used to store knowledge graphs. So now all of this also funnels right into a NASA proposal that we're working on. And this would be a Space Biosciences grant that we mentioned last week. And we are also, engineering is also looking into IPFS. This is a file system that's a peer-to-peer hypermedia, based on a peer-to-peer hypermedia protocol designed to preserve and grow humanity's knowledge by making the web upgradable, resilient, and more open. And that's a quote from, that's their tagline from their site. But engineering has proposed that we take a look at this, a serious look at it. So we are. And we are still under engineering, product, QA, and ops, and customers, partners, and collaborators. So in terms of the financial markets, under the financial markets, we are going to just talk about product announcements. And we have issued a press release related to the thematic Crypto Baskets API version 1.2 that is available, and we're continuing to QA this. And as machine learning operation, it does get better as it's used. So we're looking at adding more human in the loop aspects to it. As of today, we do have engineering ramping up to service about 100 plus customer requests. So we've got over 100 new customer requests that have come in recently. And this is for datasets and the APIs. So we are backlogged, and engineering has to deliver on a few things before we can even get to these customers, so we're keeping them at bay. This is a good problem to have, so we're also familiar with navigating through a scenario like this. And next, under product announcements, under financial markets, we've got the Vector Screen UI component. Now, I talked about the Vector Screen component being used in the filters today of the thematic baskets that can be accessed on the thematic baskets channel. But we are creating a Vector Screen UI, so engineering is going to not make that a priority until after February 19th, basically. And that's... You may ask, why are we building a Vector Screen UI component before a basket UI component? Well, first, it's simpler, and more importantly, if we build a basket UI component where a retail trader or investor is able to interact with basket trading, the must-have is a one-click execution for that basket. You have to have one-click tradable baskets. So on the short side and on the long side. And we have yet to implement that kind of functionality. We're working on that. So until then, we can issue a new product, we can release a new product, and that would be a screener that interacts with the CryptoBasket API that enables fast, clean screening, but also is developed for cryptos and stocks, and is developed in response to the way that we found focus group members and beta testers using the basket generator. So it will be able to screen based on standard indicators like liquidity, volume, market cap, and soon to be things like revenue. And it will also enable filtering based on theme, topic, or concept, or a keyword. For example, screen based on metaverse in the context of DeFi, or metaverse in the context of artificial intelligence, or NFTs, or solar power in the context of carbon credits. So we're also going to be able to showcase this to every potential customer on the retail and institutional side, which is what we're gearing up to do. And of course, all of this is based on how well our correlation matrix data sets are designed and built, along with the advanced language modeling that we use. Next, we'll move to corporate development, business development, sales, and marketing. And as mentioned, we have a nice surprise ahead of us, and that would be that we've got over 100 plus customer signups, and we have yet to determine whether or not some are for the paid subscription tiers or whether or not some are for the trial. We suspect most will be for the free trial, on the free trial tier, and that's going to mean that some will result in customizations that we'll need to make. We anticipate maybe about 5% of these will be institutions. We've looked through most of them. We're waiting to hear back from some. Until you hear back, sometimes you don't know who they are. So we'll keep everyone updated. But this is just what we were looking for. So this is all part of the process in terms of advancing the company toward achieving consequential revenue. So customer support and our onboarding team are responding as we speak. Next, we've got IR, PR, and Marcom, and we've got some SAB announcements in the pipeline. We've also got new product announcements in the pipeline related to graph networks and relationship networks. And we've also got broad collaborations that we'll be talking to the public about, in addition to our collaborators talking to the public about. And I think that's what everyone's looking forward to. And we are too. And that's, of course, going to happen before we jointly release any kind of poster or abstract presentation. And that would be on February 19th. Next, we'll move on to exchanges, and everything is in process there. And after that, we've got questions from the trader base. First question, what do you see as the biggest risks to the financial industry's adoption of the VXV token on their balance sheet, and what steps do you have in place to mitigate that risk or risks? Well, we see price fluctuations like any crypto company or any company that has a crypto arm. We look at price fluctuations as something that would prevent institutions from adopting crypto or putting it on their books. And it's been a pain point for some. We know that some groups have adopted crypto, and because of the price fluctuations, I think it was Steam, decided to not use it anymore. And I think a few other companies made the same decision, so we have to adjust the price of the data set, and we're capable of doing that. We have controls in place based on API calls that we can make and adjust the sensitivity levels, price sensitivity levels, and in the end, the price of the actual data set. Question 2, you mentioned that LCX will roll out the baskets on different trading platforms. When I look up with who they are connected, I see some big names. Are you willing to share on what platforms the baskets will be available? Well, we don't know what they're going to decide yet. We were told at least 2. And that makes sense. You don't want to roll out a new product across your entire property landscape. Question 3. Can you please give a deeper update on meetings with Morningstar, S&P, and crypto exchanges? Well, the deepest update we can give with S&P is that we put S&P on hold because we knew that we would have to provide S&P with a dataset toolkit designed for their engineers, and they did not have any NLP engineers at the time. So they mentioned they were building out their NLP engineering team. And that kind of put things on hold for us because what we do is fairly advanced on the NLP, NLU side, on the language modeling side. And that includes extracting vectors and building correlation matrix data sets. And that's an algorithmic process. And once you have a correlation matrix data set, you should know how to cluster it. And that's a standard machine learning operation in the unsupervised learning area. Also, standard knowledge for an NLP engineer these days. So if you don't have those kinds of experts or those kinds of team members, the adoption is going to be very slow. And the learning curve is going to be long and steep. So, or high, very, very steep and high. And that's going to mean that at the time, it was better for us to put S&P on hold and focus on Morningstar, who knew us, knew our team, has known us for 20 years, in fact, and also knew what we had to offer. And we also, at the same time, knew that we had a chance at making our message 10 times more powerful by having essentially a scientific study be done with our data sets here. And that's what we chose to do with Imperial College of London. And now we're working with University College of London to collaborate on this same thing. And with CERN, it's much better for us to roll out that way with Morningstar's customers than it is to roll out essentially as a no-name. It's better to have UCL, ICL, and CERN and NASA in our camp, along with Azure Space / SpaceX. We know that we can enter the financial markets and penetrate in a much deeper way and broader way, and in a much more powerful way. And in fact, looking at the scale of things, we look at this as a faster path to revenue when you add it all up. In terms of crypto exchanges, CoinMetro was not ready to engage in terms of one-click basket execution, and neither was LCX, but recently LCX became ready and contacted us. They let us know that they had the engineering resources available, and we are now preparing new API documentation for them, and they're going to run a couple of tests and determine what kind of coverage the basket provides, or in terms of what kind of coverage they can provide a basket. So that's an unknown right now, so we'll work through that. But in any case, it's likely going to be a list of every exchange that they work with, and a list of cryptos associated to each of those exchanges. So it's not going to be an overnight integration process, and we're not going to have engineering resources to devote fully to that until after February 19th. However, there is a possibility we could get them rolling in January with this. Question 4. Can you please share an update on how you are managing the various cost plus resources with the huge amount of computational power needed to create millions of data sets? Very easily. You don't need huge amounts of computational power to create data sets, correlation matrix data sets. We were just talking with UCL about this today, and the fact that large data sets or massive amounts of data and computational power results in a massive amount of noise when you want to solve very particular problem sets. So we have no need of massive amounts of computational power to produce a correlation matrix data set that correlates a particular set of protein compounds to a particular set of drug compounds in the context of a disease. Question 5. Any plans to include CRO's networks Kronos to the crypto basket? No, unless we see it can immediately impact our bottom line. And next we'll move to strategy. So another way to look at what we do would be decision augmentation. We wanted to mention that. We're always looking for better ways to explain how AI or machine learning or correlation matrix data sets augment not only the scientific process, but any discovery process that anyone can engage in. We've also had recent chatter on our channels, our public channels, related to Google's work with vectors. Google's work with vectors has been in the headlines. So if you do a search on Google for Google vectors, you'll find recent headlines related to Google's continued work with vectors. We just want to let the public know that at the heart of the global battle for AI dominance is the vector, also known as the feature vector or embedding. Now, number 1, precisely how a vector is constructed with scored feature attributes for a given problem set, along with their knowledge domain, matters. Number 2, how you compare your input and output vectors for similarity matters. What distance calculations you use and so forth, or whether or not you even ensemble them. Also, at the heart of most every AI and ML operation is the distance calculation for comparing vectors for similarity. So just because a company operates with vectors does not mean they know how to compete using vectors for video. Remember that 23-person company called YouTube that Google tried to compete with and lost to the tune of billions? So when we look at vector space modeling, we have a very particular way of doing it. We have a very particular way of calculating. It's very proprietary, and it is the tip of the spear when it comes to AI and machine learning today, and that is the language model. So how well you construct your vectors and how well you compare them for some similarity is what matters. This concludes our conference call for this week. Feel free to send your questions or comments online. Thanks for joining.